My parents told me to drop out of university to save the family bakery, but they were really covering up their golden child's $280,000 failure. My name is Jacob, I'm 23 years old, and I'm currently in my third year of university. My major is computer science, which I'm honestly passionate about. Ever since I was in middle school and built my first website in a school project, I knew I wanted a future in IT. It's where I feel like myself, like I can actually make something of my own. But it hasn't been easy getting here, especially with the kind of family I come from. See, my family owns a bakery. Not just any bakery. It's a family legacy, one of those old-school, brick-front shops with a hand-painted sign and the smell of fresh bread that hits you as soon as you open the door. My great-grandparents opened it 45 years ago, and ever since then, it's been passed down like some sacred torch. My dad, Mark, runs the place now, and my mom, Diana, basically acts as the heart and soul of the business, managing customers, keeping the books, and doing whatever needs to be done. It's been our family's pride for decades. Naturally, I grew up in that bakery. I was probably wiping down counters before I could write my own name. By the time I was 13, I was already waking up before sunrise on Saturdays to help prep dough, load trays, and eventually run the front counter during rush hours. Summer breaks weren't for vacation. They were for mastering the cash register, folding boxes, and pretending I knew what I was doing when a customer asked about gluten-free options. I won't lie, there were moments I liked it. The regulars knew my name. The smell of cinnamon rolls baking at 5 a.m. is something that sticks with you. But the older I got, the more I felt like I was being slowly roped into a future I didn't want. My dad started talking about expansion, about Jacob taking over someday. My mom would say things like, "One day, this will all be yours," and I'd just smile and nod, knowing full well that I wanted out. I wanted servers and code, not flour and ovens. But that dream of mine? It's never really been respected at home. Not the way you'd expect from your parents. And a big part of that, I've come to realize, is Cameron, my younger brother. Cameron is 23 years younger than me, but if you asked my parents, he might as well be the second coming of some perfect golden child. He doesn't help much around the bakery. He's never woken up at 4 a.m. to roll dough or worked through the stress of a holiday rush. But it doesn't matter. My parents treat him like he's the crown jewel of our family. Maybe it's because he's more outgoing, or maybe because he's always known how to play their game. Cameron's the kind of guy who walks into a room and somehow makes it about him within 5 minutes. He's studying business at a local community college, but he's already talking like he's going to take over the bakery and turn it into a franchise. Dad loves that. Mom practically lights up whenever Cameron says something half-intelligent about branding or marketing, even if it's just something he heard on a podcast. Meanwhile, I'm juggling full-time university, freelance coding gigs just to make rent, and still getting calls from Dad asking if I can just swing by the shop real quick to fix the damn receipt printer. I'm expected to do it all, while Cameron gets praised for suggesting we use Instagram more. I've lived in this weird shadow for years. I'm the one who has quietly kept things running when people didn't show up, who stepped in on holidays when the bakery was slammed, who helped Mom balance the books when she was too tired to see straight. But none of that seems to count when you're standing next to their favorite son. I guess it's easy to ignore the kid who's always doing what's expected without complaining. So yeah, that's the setup. Jacob, the good son who never felt like enough. Cameron, the favorite. Mark and Diana, the parents who built their dream and decided it should become mine, whether I wanted it or not. I thought things might change once I got into university. I thought maybe they'd finally see that I had my own dreams, my own goals. But if anything, it just made the divide more obvious. Cameron stayed close to home. I left. Cameron talks about the bakery like it's his birthright. I talk about servers and code, and my dad looks at me like I'm speaking a foreign language. So, here's what happened. It was a Sunday afternoon during one of my visits home, right in the middle of midterms. I'd driven down from school because Mom asked me to come by for dinner, which sounded harmless enough, and honestly I hadn't seen them in a few weeks. I figured I'd get a decent meal, maybe check in with Cameron, and be back on the road before dark. Dinner was roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, the usual. Mom was smiling too much. Dad was uncharacteristically quiet. Cameron wasn't even home. I didn't think much of it at first. We ate, made small talk about the bakery's Easter promotions, a new espresso machine Dad had been eyeing for the front counter, the usual stuff. Then after dinner, when I started getting up to wash my plate, Mom asked me to sit back down. "We need to talk," she said, in that tone that made my stomach knot. Dad leaned forward, elbows on the table like he was settling in for a business pitch. And then he said it. Straight out, no hesitation. "Jacob, we think it's time for you to leave university." I blinked. I actually thought I'd misheard him. "What?" He repeated it, this time slower. "You need to leave school. We need you at the bakery full-time." For a second I didn't say anything. I was just trying to figure out if this was some kind of twisted joke. But no one was laughing. Mom was nodding like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "Cameron's too young to take on real responsibility," she added. "And we can't keep doing this without help." I felt like someone had poured a bucket of ice water over me. I looked at them both, waiting for some kind of punchline, but it wasn't coming. "Are you serious?" I asked. "I'm in my 3rd year. I've worked my ass off to stay in school. You think I should just throw that away?" Dad sighed like I was being difficult. "You've had a good run. But university is expensive, Jacob. You know that. Almost $40,000 a year. And with how things are going, it's not sustainable anymore." I was quiet for a moment, processing. They weren't wrong about the cost. Tuition came in at just over $38,000 a year. They covered part of it, less now than they used to, but the rest came from scholarships I'd busted my back to get, and part-time jobs I juggled with classes. I'd been working nights doing web dev for a local tech firm, coding until 2 or 3 in the morning some nights just to make ends meet. "You helped me get this far," I said, trying to stay calm. "Why would you ask me to quit now?" Mom folded her arms. "Because the bakery is suffering. We're short-staffed. Sales are down. It's not like it used to be. And you're capable. You know the business. You've always been reliable." "And Cameron?" I asked. "He's 20. He lives here. Why not ask him?" "Cameron isn't ready," Dad said, cutting me off. "He's not like you. He still needs time. He's figuring things out." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So I give up everything because Cameron's too young? You want me to walk away from the only thing I've ever really wanted, to come home and roll dough again?" Mom's voice got sharper. "Don't be dramatic. It's not like you're going to waste your life. This is your family's business. It means something. You're not above it." I didn't respond. I just stared at them, stunned. I thought about the late nights, the student loans, the coding certificate, the connections I'd been slowly building in the tech world. I thought about all the times I'd pulled double shifts at the bakery during high school, only to have Cameron disappear for hours and no one say a word. I thought about the fact that I wasn't even asked, I was told. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake in my old room, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly overhead, wondering how I'd ever gotten to this place, where my parents would rather sacrifice my future than inconvenience their favorite son. And that was the moment something inside me started to shift. I wasn't just tired. I was done being the reliable one, the responsible one, the one they leaned on whenever things got hard. Because they weren't asking for help. They were asking me to give up everything I had worked for. After they told me to drop out of university, I didn't say much for a while. I just sat there, quiet, letting their words settle in my head like a thick fog. My dad kept talking, repeating the same things over and over again like a broken record, how the bakery needed me, how this was about family, how I'd be doing the right thing by stepping up. My mom nodded along, looking like she expected me to just roll over and agree. But I didn't. I told them no. Flat out. No hesitation. I told them I wasn't going to throw away 3 years of hard work, long nights, missed parties, and everything I'd built at school just because Cameron didn't feel like getting his hands dirty. I told them I wasn't going to drop out to save a business that wasn't mine to begin with. I said it calmly, but there was no mistaking the finality in my voice. That's when Dad's expression changed. The disappointment morphed into something colder. He leaned back in his chair and folded his arms across his chest. "Then you're on your own," he said. Mom chimed in before I could respond. "If you're not willing to help us, Jacob, we're not going to help you anymore. No more tuition. No more support. You want to chase your little tech dream? Fine. Do it without our help." I nodded slowly. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. I went upstairs, walked into my room, and closed the door. I didn't even sit down. I just pulled out my duffel bag from under the bed, opened the closet, and started packing. A few changes of clothes. My laptop, a couple notebooks, toiletries, the essentials, everything else I could live without. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't even go back downstairs. I texted Tyler, one of my best friends from school, and asked if I could crash at his place for a bit. He lived about 40 minutes away in a shared apartment with 2 other guys. It wasn't ideal, but he replied within 2 minutes. "Yeah man, come through. We'll make it work." So I zipped up the bag, slung it over my shoulder, grabbed my phone and charger, and walked out of the house. No one stopped me. No one called after me. No one asked where I was going. So, after I left home and moved in with Tyler, things went downhill fast. It didn't even take a full week for the consequences to start piling up. First, my phone stopped working. I didn't get any warning, no heads up, just woke up one morning and realized I had no service. No texts, no calls, not even data. I tried restarting it, checked the SIM card, nothing. That's when it hit me. My parents had shut it off. I had been on a family plan since high school, and they were the ones footing the bill. I guess they figured if I was going to be independent, I could start there. A day later, I got an email from my landlord. The automatic payment for my half of the rent hadn't gone through. My parents had stopped paying their contribution, which was $950 a month. Tyler's place wasn't meant to be long-term, and I had still been splitting time between there and my off-campus apartment. But without that money, there was no way I could afford the rent on my own. I went straight to the university's financial services office and applied for an emergency loan. I remember sitting in that waiting room, my leg bouncing nonstop, surrounded by other students who probably had no idea what it felt like to be completely cut off from your family over a single decision. When it was finally my turn, I explained the situation, left out some details but told them the truth. My financial support had been pulled unexpectedly, and I needed help just to stay in school. Thankfully, they approved a small loan, enough to keep me afloat for the rest of the semester. After that, I signed up for the cheapest data plan I could find. It was prepaid, bare bones. No unlimited anything, just enough to check email, message friends, and get directions if I needed them. I had to use Wi-Fi for everything else. It wasn't ideal, but it kept me connected. I picked up extra shifts at the campus snack bar where I'd been working part-time since my second year. At first, I'd been doing around 10 hours a week. After everything blew up, I talked to my manager and asked for as many shifts as possible. She was understanding, slid me into morning, evening, and even weekend slots when someone else called out. The pay wasn't great, but it was consistent. I slashed my spending completely. I canceled all my subscriptions, Spotify, Netflix, even my cloud storage for school projects. I started cooking every meal at home, which really meant pasta, rice, eggs, and frozen vegetables. I didn't go out unless I had to. No coffee shop. No bars. No takeout. I bought generic everything and made it stretch. My only expenses were rent, food, transit, and whatever I needed for classes. After I'd settled into this new version of my life, bare-bones budget, non-stop work, cutting corners just to stay in school, I thought maybe the worst was over. But I was wrong. The next wave came, and it came from all directions. It started with the social media messages. At first it was just a few. An aunt from my mom's side asking what was going on and saying I should really call home, a distant cousin saying he heard I'd left school and hoped everything was okay. But it escalated quickly. The messages began coming in daily, sometimes hourly. Some were supportive, telling me to stay strong, saying they respected my decision and that it was brave to stand up for myself. But most weren't like that at all. Most were angry, accusing, almost cruel. People I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly calling me selfish. They said I had abandoned my family, turned my back on the people who raised me. One uncle actually messaged me saying, "You think you're better than the rest of us just because you're in college? Don't forget who paid for you to get there." Another relative wrote, "Real men don't run away from responsibility." Every time I opened my phone, it was like stepping into a war zone. The worst part was Cameron. He posted publicly, not just in a message to me but right there on his feed for everyone to see. He wrote, "Jacob is just making his life harder than it needs to be. The bakery's out of his league anyway. Always has been." That hit harder than I expected. He knew what he was doing. He wanted people to see it. He wanted them to pick sides. And a lot of them did. Our cousins started chiming in, some siding with me, others parroting whatever their parents were saying. One cousin on my dad's side wrote me privately and said she didn't blame me for leaving, that I deserved better. Another from my mom's side posted something vague about kids these days thinking they're too good for hard work, which was clearly aimed at me. A few tried to stay neutral, sending me messages like, "I'm not getting involved, but I hope things calm down soon," which honestly just felt like them choosing to stay on my parents' good side. My inbox became a mix of guilt trips, veiled insults, and awkward half-hearted attempts at support. I stopped opening notifications after a while. I logged out of Instagram and turned off alerts for Facebook. The pressure was too much. They weren't just trying to bring me back. They were trying to shame me into folding. I found out the truth by accident. It wasn't something they confessed. It wasn't a family meeting or a phone call. It was a slip-up, something small that snowballed into something massive. One night, I was hanging out in Tyler's living room, trying to catch a break between my extra shifts and cramming for finals, when I got a message from my cousin Olivia. She's one of the few people in the family who had stayed on my side throughout the whole mess. She'd been quiet lately, but out of nowhere she sent me a screenshot of a conversation from the extended family group chat. I hadn't even known there was a new one, probably because I'd been removed from the old one. The screenshot was of Cameron bragging, no surprise there, but the content stopped me cold. He was talking about how starting a business is hard, and how no one understands the pressure of being responsible for a six-figure investment. Then, someone, another cousin, I think, asked how much had been invested. Cameron answered casually. It was around $280,000, but it's covered. I stared at the message for a long time. $280,000. That was more than I would have guessed my parents even had access to. Something about it didn't add up. So I messaged Olivia back and asked her what she knew. At first she hesitated, said she didn't want to stir things up. But then she said, "Jacob, you should know. Your parents mortgaged the bakery. And part of the house." I didn't believe it. I thought she must have been misinformed or misunderstood. But she wasn't. She sent me another screenshot, this time from another relative talking about how Mark and Diana had gone all in to help Cameron start a business, a so-called upscale gamer cafe with high-end gaming rigs, VR booths, luxury chairs, LED mood lighting, the whole 9 yards. A place Cameron described as the future of gaming experiences. But here's the thing. Cameron has never run a business. He's never worked in retail, never held a management role, never even held a steady part-time job longer than a few months. He spent most of his time streaming half-heartedly to 6 viewers and making logo mock-ups on Canva. And yet, somehow, he convinced our parents to bet nearly everything they had on this fantasy. I didn't get the full details until weeks later, but eventually it all came out. My parents took out a massive loan, more than $280,000, putting up the bakery as collateral. Not just the shop itself, but part of the house too. They signed off on everything for Cameron. They co-signed, they met with banks, they pushed through paperwork. They risked everything for a dream he hadn't even tested. And the worst part? The business never even launched. Cameron spent nearly all the money on equipment, branding, and interior renovations for a space he never even locked down. He changed concepts halfway through. At one point he was going to include a gourmet snack bar, then a podcasting studio, then a crypto payment integration. Nothing made sense. Every week the plan changed. He kept saying he was getting close to launch, but deadlines came and went. Months passed. The lease he'd been eyeing fell through. The supplier deals collapsed. The VR gear sat in unopened boxes in a rented storage unit while the interest on the loan started to pile up. By the time I found out, the money was gone and there was no cafe, no business, and no plan to recover. And suddenly everything made sense. The desperation in my parents' voices. The urgency to get me back in the bakery. The pressure. The guilt-tripping. It wasn't about needing help. It was about needing someone to clean up the mess. They'd put everything on the line for Cameron, and now they were scrambling to salvage what was left. They didn't just want me home, they wanted me to be the safety net. The backup plan. And they never told me. They would have let me drop out of school, walk away from everything I'd built, and take on a sinking ship I didn't even know was drowning. That was the moment I realized just how far they were willing to go to protect Cameron, even if it meant sacrificing me. The call came out of nowhere. It was late on a Tuesday night, sometime after 11. I was sitting in Tyler's apartment, going over some Python modules for a midterm, when my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. At first I ignored it, thinking it was spam or maybe a debt collector, but then it rang again. Something told me to answer the third time. I picked up and said hello, and for a few seconds there was just silence on the line. Then I heard my mother's voice. "Jacob," she said. It was quiet, strained, and she was crying. She told me she missed me. She told me everything was falling apart. That they were scared, and that the bakery might not survive the year. That she and my dad were arguing constantly. That Cameron was depressed and refusing to leave his room. She said, "We need you to come home, please. You're the only one who can save this family." Her voice cracked as she said it, and for a second, just a second, I felt the old instinct kicking in. The part of me that always wanted to fix things, to step in, to be the responsible one. But I caught myself. I stayed quiet for a moment, then asked her one simple question. "Why?" She hesitated, and I asked again, this time more firmly. "Why did you put everything on the line for Cameron? Why would you risk the bakery and the house for his startup? Why him?" She started stumbling through excuses. She said they believed in him. That he needed the support. That he had vision. That he had passion. But none of it made sense. I asked her what made Cameron so special that she and Dad were willing to throw away everything our family had built for 45 years, everything they claimed to care about. I asked her why, when I had spent years working my ass off to build something real, something stable, they had never once offered me that kind of trust. That's when the call turned. She went quiet for a few seconds, and then I heard another voice in the background. My father. He grabbed the phone from her, and the first thing he said was, "So this is how it is now? You're too good for us." I didn't answer right away, and he didn't wait. "You betrayed us," he said, his voice sharp, angry. "You walked out. You left your mother crying. You turned your back on your family." I said, "I didn't betray anyone. You asked me to give up everything I worked for to clean up a mess you made, and I said no." That was it. That was the line that set him off. He started going off, ranting about how ungrateful I was, how I'd always looked down on them, how my degree was useless, how my tech dreams were nothing but fantasies. He said the bakery had built this family, and I had the nerve to throw it all away for some laptop and a dorm room. He said Cameron was at least trying something new, that he was creative, ambitious. Then he said, "You think writing code makes you better than everyone else? You're a glorified intern." That one hit me hard, but I didn't let it show. I let him finish, let him dump everything he had bottled up. And when he finally stopped, I just said, "I'm done." Then I hung up. No yelling. No goodbye. Just silence. That was the last conversation I had with either of them. After that last phone call with my parents, I made my decision. I blocked every single one of them. My parents, Cameron, every cousin, aunt, and uncle who had messaged me with insults or guilt trip. I changed my number the next day and sent out a message to my close friends, asking them not to share my contact info or respond to any attempts from my family to reach me through them. I told them everything they needed to know, that I was cutting ties for good and I wasn't looking back. Since then, I've stayed in school. I'm still working part-time at the campus snack bar, still juggling classes and scraping by on minimum wage, but I've never felt more in control of my life. I canceled out the noise. I stopped living for their approval. I stopped bending myself into something they wanted me to be. The bakery, from what I've heard through the grapevine, is barely hanging on. Business has slowed to a crawl. The loan repayments are eating them alive. They've laid off most of their staff and reduced hours. No one's posting about it online anymore. There are whispers that they might shut down completely before the year is out. As for Cameron, he's vanished. No one seems to know where he went. He's stopped posting on social media. Last I heard, he left town. The expensive VR equipment is still sitting in storage, gathering dust. And me? I'm still here. Still coding. Still studying. Still living in a small apartment with second-hand furniture and peeling paint on the walls. But it's mine. The silence is mine. The choices are mine. For the first time in my life, I'm not living under someone else's expectations or shame or disappointment. I'm building something real now, and I'm doing it without them.